What makes an ideal market? What can go wrong? Economists use ideal markets as a baseline for studying other situations in which ideal conditions are not met. I'm Professor Christina Brown, and this is Economics for Everyone. Our world is a complex place. Economists, when looking at markets, try to simplify things by keeping the following characteristics in mind to define an ideal market, i.e., one that maximizes total welfare. An ideal market for a particular good has 4 conditions. 1, that there are many, many people who want to purchase that good, and there are many, many people who want to make and sell that good. 2, we also need that everything about that good, the quality, the longevity of it, is known to both the buyer and the seller. 3rd, we need that transaction costs to purchase that good are low. And 4th, we need free entry, that it's costless for a potential producer to begin selling that good or for a current seller to leave the market. Plus, we need a system of money and enforcement of property rights and contracts. In ideal markets, producers are trying to figure out the best way to make and sell goods and services in order to maximize profits. And on the other side, buyers use their income to make purchases that provide them with the best outcomes. In an ideal market, all goods and services are identical in quality and there's no transaction costs. And consumers decide how best to spend their money on goods and who they want to buy it from to get the best prices. So putting it all together, in an ideal market, the right things are made, i.e. the inputs it takes to make those things, and what's made is what consumers will buy and will lead to the highest profits. It's made by the right firms. All of the stuff that's made is made by those who can make it most cheaply. It's done at the lowest possible costs, so the firms figure out how to pull their inputs together to produce things as cheaply as possible. And they're bought by the people who value the goods most highly. And prices show the people the trade-offs that they're making to ensure that the people who value that good the most are the ones that purchase it. So why is that all ideal? Well, everyone's just going about their business trying to do the best they can by themselves. And at the end of the day, the result is this efficient economy that maximizes total surplus, where consumers couldn't be made any happier by doing something different, and producers couldn't be happier by choosing to produce something different. So we end up making the right things in the right amounts as cheaply as possible. And on top of all of those benefits, an ideal market wouldn't even require some sort of central command. This would happen if everyone is just pursuing their own self-interest. This ideal market is an example of the invisible hand at work. If economists know what would make this ideal market, why doesn't it happen? What goes wrong? Well, remember those 4 conditions we needed. It turns out that for many goods and services, it's tricky to create a market which meets those conditions. For example, one condition we needed was that it was costless for new firms to start or stop selling a given product. And we know that for most goods, that's just not the case. You would need initial resources to start that new business. So when these conditions don't hold, then the market allocation may no longer result in the maximum social welfare. Another one of these 4 conditions is that there are many sellers, so there's many people to compete and offer the lowest price. So one problem can arise in markets when there's only one firm serving as the sole supplier. When there's one sole supplier, economists call this a monopoly. Monopoly is an industry structure in which only one seller provides a good or service that has no close substitutes. For example, national parks, or a firm that has a patent. Why do monopolies reduce social welfare? Well, remember that suppliers are always trying to maximize profits. A monopolist knows that they're the only supplier, and so they end up restricting output. This ultimately drives up prices, and so there's too little produced and for too high a price. Monopolists have the ability to directly affect prices through what we call market power. An even more common problem is that a few larger firms dominate the market, what economists call an oligopoly. Oligopoly is the market structure that applies when there are only a few firms competing. An example could be the market for automobiles in a small town that only has 2 or 3 car dealerships. One of the assumptions in our ideal market is that everyone is doing what's best for them, and every decision is being accounted for by prices. So everyone is kind of performing a cost-benefit analysis. A cost-benefit analysis is a calculation that adds up costs and benefits using a common unit of measurement like dollars. But some actions we take have costs and benefits to people other than those engaged in the transaction. An example of this is what happens when a large factory puts out a lot of CO2 into the air, and they don't account for the costs this imposes on bystanders or those living in the area. This is an example of an externality. An externality occurs when an economic activity has either a spillover cost or benefit on a bystander. If a good or service has an externality, then the free market won't produce the socially optimum quantity. Ideal markets at the end of the day are all about maximizing efficiency. Efficient markets provide a lot of benefits to society. But despite all these positives, there is one thing that ideal markets do not deal with well: inequality. Markets, even efficient ideal markets, can result in very unequal outcomes across people. In later discussions, we'll talk more about how economists think about trading off efficiency versus reducing inequality. Economists study ideal markets as a baseline, so we know what works well, and we can better react and adapt when things go wrong. Knowing about ideal markets can help you better understand why markets work the way they do, because economics is for everyone.